Hi, I'm Tom Rako, and I have with me Latte. Her legal name is Guardrail Ivory Arrow, and some of you have probably met her daughter, Guardrail Silver Arrow. We call her Precious. And Latte is a granddaughter of Hall of Fame Guardrail, and she's an American-bred English pointer. And sometimes a dog will go on point, and they can be difficult to find. That's why people will put bells on the collars. Only sometimes, if they're in a big area, it's still hard to determine where exactly the dog is. And when the dog is standing still, the bell isn't ringing. And when you have one of these collars, has a beeper that I can set so then when they stop for 7 seconds or more, sometimes they're going to the bathroom, but if they stop and they're pointing, it'll start beeping. And this has a locator, so I can beep it like this to if I'm not exactly sure where the dog is. It's a very handy device. Some people have GPS units, and sometimes she could be in a distance, or if the wind is blowing, it's hard to locate. But I want to tell you this, that God knows where you are. I do not always know where Latte, Guardrail, Ivory Arrow is, but God always knows where you are. I think of how Psalm 139, uh, David wrote, he says, concerning the Lord, he says, "You have searched me, O Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you, Lord, know it completely." God knows what you're going to say before you say it. He knows where you're at right now. I think of in the book of Genesis, Hagar, the handmaid of Sarah. She was being mistreated by Sarah, and she ran away. And an angel of the Lord spoke to her, and Hagar gave the Lord this name. Uh, she said, "You are the God who sees me." For she said, "Here I have seen the one who sees me." She recognized she was out in the wilderness, out in that desert area, running away, and yet the Lord knew where she was, and she ended up going back. And ultimately, God worked in her life as well. I think of how Isaiah was told to go and talk to King Hezekiah. Hezekiah was a good king. He was a godly king, but he ended up with a sickness, and Isaiah the prophet was sent to tell him to set his house in order because he was going to die. He was not going to live. And Hezekiah turned his face to the wall. Nobody could see him, and he cried out to God. He prayed. And ultimately, God sent Isaiah back and told him, "You go tell Hezekiah this. Uh, the God of your father David says, I have heard your prayer. I have seen your tears. Behold, I will add 15 years to your life." God not only saw Hezekiah when he was praying in the privacy of that bed of sickness, but he saw the tears that cut their way across his cheek. I think of how Job sometimes he went through such a horrendous amount of trials and suffering, lost 10 children in one day, lost his wealth, lost his health, and he was a godly man. He was not perfect, because we know that from the end of the chapter. After he got a greater glimpse of God, he says, "I repent in dust and ashes." But he was a extremely godly man, and yet there were times when especially when he didn't know uh, if God where God was. In fact, he said in Job 28, 23 verses 8 to 10, he says, "If I go east," talking about the Lord, he said, "He's not there. If I go to the west, I cannot find him. When he is at work in the north, I cannot behold him. When he turns to the south, I cannot see him." What was Job saying? He says, "I can't find God." But then he says this in Jeremiah 23:10. He says, "Yet he knows the way that I take, and when he has tested me, I will come forth as gold." He said, "I don't know where God is, but I know this, and this is a great comfort, that God knows exactly where I am." I may not always know where Ivory Arrow is, Latte, and there's times when I've had to go look for her. She'd gone on point, and the bird had flushed, And I went back, and she stayed right there until I went back. And sometimes I go back with a beeper, another beeper, and trying to get her to come. And now she's gotten a little better with that. She'll come, but it's hard to call her off sometimes. Hard to find her. But you know what? God always knows where you are, friend. He knows exactly where you are right now, and He knows what you're going through. And what a great comfort that is, isn't it? What a great comfort that God knows all about you. The very hairs of your head are all numbered. Yes, He knows about your failings, but you know what? He sees the potential within you as well. He knows what He's doing, and if you'll cry out to Him and trust in Him and wait on Him, He's going to work all these things for your good and for His ultimate glory. He knows what He's doing. This has been Tom Rako and Ivory Arrow, and thanks for joining us.